The invitation arrived folded too carefully, as if precision could make it kind. Cream paper. Gold edge. Her name spelled correctly for once. Mara Vale turned it over twice before opening, because turning it over meant delaying the moment her chest would do that old, familiar collapse. Baby shower. Saturday afternoon. A cafe she had never liked. Hosted by him. Her ex. The words sat politely, smiling. They pretended not to know what they were doing. She imagined his hand writing the guest list, pausing, then adding her name like a dare. Like a performance. She did not think of the woman carrying his child. She thought of the chair she would have to sit in. The way eyes would skim her face, searching for evidence of failure. She folded the invitation again. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. 3 years had taught her how to be steady when she should have been loud. She had learned how to walk through grocery stores without buying the cereal he liked, how to sleep on her side of the bed even after the bed was gone. The worst nights were quiet ones. The nights when nothing happened and still everything hurt. She had learned to breathe through those nights. To breathe through mornings. To breathe through the sound of his name. She did not tell anyone about the invitation. Not her sister, who would have burned it. Not her mother, who would have begged her not to go. She put it in her bag and went to work, answered emails, smiled at a stranger who held the door. At lunch she sat alone and pressed her palm to her abdomen, feeling the faint, uneven movement beneath skin. The movement that had become her clock. 3 distinct rhythms now, impossible to mistake. She had stopped being afraid of the word impossible. The pregnancies had been quiet, almost secretive, as if her body knew to keep them hidden. At first she told no one. Then she told one doctor, who said triplets like a warning. She told herself it was only a number, like any other. She learned how to measure her days in kicks and appointments. She learned how to sleep sitting up. She learned how to let people stare without answering questions. The fathers. The plans. The future. She learned how to say I'm managing, which was not a lie, only incomplete. On Saturday she dressed slowly. A soft grey dress, loose enough. Flats she could slip off if her feet swelled. She braided her hair because it made her feel like someone who had time. Before leaving, she stood in the doorway and closed her eyes. She did not imagine the room. She imagined silence. She imagined standing and not shrinking. She imagined the weight of her body as proof of endurance, not shame. The cafe smelled like citrus and sugar. Balloons hovered obediently. There were pastel plates, tiny forks, the ritual softness of celebration. He stood near the counter, older in the way men become older after leaving, comfortable, almost kind. When he saw her, his mouth did something practiced. Surprise, then approval, then a flicker she recognized too well. Satisfaction. He stepped forward, touched her elbow as if it were still allowed. You came, he said, quietly enough to sound generous. She nodded. She did not sit where he gestured. She chose a chair near the window, where light fell plainly. Conversations stalled. Then resumed, louder. Someone laughed too hard. She felt it then, the shift. Not because she was unwanted, but because she was unexpected. Because her body told a story no one had rehearsed for. The woman with the ribboned sash noticed next. Her smile thinned, then steadied. She was younger than Mara had imagined, softer around the eyes. Tired. The sash said mother-to-be in glitter. She approached with careful politeness. Hi, she said. I didn't realize. She gestured vaguely. Mara understood. I didn't advertise, Mara said. It was the first sentence she had spoken in hours. It felt accurate. They Saturday. Tea was poured. Gifts were opened. Each box drew a practiced gasp. Mara listened to paper tearing, the small chorus of approval. Then a foot pressed against her ribs. Then another. Then another, a flurry like birds testing a window. She inhaled and waited for the moment to pass. It did not. The room seemed to tilt toward her, as if the noise itself had noticed. Someone asked if she was okay. She stood. She did not know she was going to stand until she was already upright, hands braced on the table. I need to say something, she said, not loudly. Not softly. The room stilled because rooms do that when truth approaches. She rested her palms on her belly. "There are 3, she said. "No apology. No explanation. Just the fact." He looked at her then. Really looked. Not as an audience. Not as a mistake. As consequence. The air held. Someone whispered. The woman with the sash sat very still, one hand covering her mouth, eyes wet but not unkind. Mara exhaled. She had not planned to steal anything. She had only planned to arrive. Mara did not remember sitting back down. Only the chair finding her, the table edge pressing into her palms. The room had resumed its breath in fragments. Cups lifted. A fork dropped. Someone cleared their throat and kept clearing it, as if sound itself could erase what had been said. She focused on the window. Outside, a woman pushed a stroller past the glass, unaware of the quiet rupture inside. The ordinariness of it nearly undid her. The babies moved again, slower now, as if they too were listening. She wondered, briefly, what they would learn from this moment. Whether the world always paused before it decided what to do with you. Whether silence could be instructive. He stayed standing. That was the first thing she noticed when she looked at him again. He had not Saturday. His hands hung at his sides, unsure. He was blinking too much. He opened his mouth and then closed it. She had once loved that hesitation, the way he weighed words. Now it looked like fear trying to pass as consideration. "I didn't know," he said finally. Not loudly. Not to the room. To her. It landed between them, thin and insufficient. She nodded because nodding required less energy than anything else. "I know," she said. It was the truest thing she could offer. She did not add that he had not asked. That he had not noticed. That absence had been their longest conversation. The woman with the sash stood. Her name, Mara realized, was pinned to her chest in looping script. Lila. She smoothed the ribbon, then let her hand fall. "Do you want water?" Lila asked, already reaching. The question was practical, almost gentle. Mara felt a sudden gratitude that surprised her. It softened something sharp. "Yes," Mara said. Her voice shook, but only once. Lila brought the glass herself. When she set it down, their fingers brushed. A small contact, but it carried weight. Lila did not pull away. "Congratulations," she said. It was not ceremonial. It was careful. As if she were stepping onto ice, testing each word. "Thank you," Mara replied. She meant it. That startled her too. Around them, the party attempted to reorganize itself. Someone suggested games. Someone else laughed too brightly. A gift bag slid toward Lila, who sat again, slower now. The glittering sash caught the light and threw it back, sharp and brief. Mara thought of all the ways women were taught to shine when expected, and how dangerous it was when the light came from somewhere else. He finally sat, across from her. The table between them was cluttered with ribbons and pastel tissue, the debris of happiness. He looked at her belly, then away, then back again. "Are you okay?" he asked, and she almost smiled at the familiarity of the useless question. "I'm here," she said. It was enough. Time moved strangely after that. It thickened. Each minute stretched, then slipped away unnoticed. The games were abandoned. Conversation fractured into smaller, quieter clusters. People kept glancing at Mara, then catching themselves and looking at their hands. She drank the water. She breathed through another wave of movement, counting silently until it passed. Lila watched her from across the table. There was something searching in her gaze, but not cruel. Curiosity braided with worry. At one point she leaned forward. "Triplets," she said softly. Not a question. Mara nodded. "Yes." "That's," Lila paused, then smiled without showing teeth. "That's a lot." Mara let out a small sound that might have been a laugh. "It is." They shared that. The truth of too much. Too many expectations. Too many futures pressing close. He stood again, suddenly restless. "I need some air," he said, to no one in particular. He brushed past chairs, through the door. The bell rang, cheerful and oblivious. Mara felt the absence he left behind like a hollow. It was familiar. She had lived inside it for years. Still, it surprised her how quickly the room rearranged itself around his leaving. As if he had been a pillar no one noticed until it was gone. Lila watched the door close. Then she looked back at Mara. "I didn't know he invited you," she said. Not accusing. Just stating a fact. "He wanted me to come," Mara replied. The words tasted odd. She did not elaborate. She did not say why. Lila nodded slowly. She picked at the edge of a napkin. "I think," she said, then stopped. Took a breath. "I think he wanted things to be simple." Mara considered that. The longing for simplicity had once felt romantic to her. Now it felt like erasure. "Things rarely are," she said. Lila met her eyes. Something passed between them then. Recognition, maybe. The understanding that they were both carrying more than was visible. Different weights. Same gravity. The party began to dissolve. People made excuses, gathered coats. Hugs were offered and accepted, some awkward, some sincere. When it was time to go, Mara stood carefully. Lila stood too. "Take care," Lila said. She hesitated, then added, "if you ever want to talk." Mara nodded. She did not promise. She did not refuse. Outside, the air was cooler. The light had shifted. Afternoon leaning toward evening. She walked slowly, one hand steadying her belly, the other empty. Behind her, laughter drifted faintly, already reasserting itself. Ahead, the street stretched, ordinary and waiting. She did not feel victorious. She did not feel ashamed. She felt tired. And beneath that, something quieter. A grief she had not known she was still carrying, finally setting itself down. He walked until the street loosened its grip on him. Past the cafe, past the bus stop, past the corner where he used to buy bread when mornings still belonged to two people. The air felt scraped clean, as if something had been removed and left a rawness behind. He kept his hands in his pockets because he did not trust them. They wanted to shake. They wanted to reach for a phone. They wanted to rewind. He had imagined the afternoon differently. That was the truth he kept circling. He had imagined her arriving smaller than memory, quieter than regret. He had imagined himself gracious. He had imagined the room understanding without being told. Shame as a neat thing, contained. Instead, it had arrived with weight. With breath. With 3 distinct pulses that rearranged the room without asking permission. He stopped at a crosswalk and waited though the light had already changed. Cars moved around him like water around a stone. He thought of the moment her hands had rested on the table. The way the room had leaned. The way his own body had betrayed him, a small sound escaping his throat before he could stop it. He had not meant to invite her to hurt her. That was the story he told himself, and it was not entirely false. He had meant to show that he was fine. That he had moved on. That life had rewarded him for choosing differently. He crossed at last, heart thudding. The idea of reward tasted bitter now. He had wanted simplicity because simplicity asked nothing of him. It did not ask him to look closely. It did not ask him to stay. He sat on a bench near the river and watched the water carry small things away. Leaves. Paper. A plastic cup spinning until it snagged and then released. He remembered the night Mara told him she was leaving. Not the words. The quiet after. The way she had folded a sweater with care, as if care itself were a language he might finally understand. He had not followed her then either. He had watched from the doorway, certain that stillness could pass for dignity. Triplets. The word had echoed without sound. He tried to picture the logistics. 3 cribs. 3 cries. The math of exhaustion. The courage of it. He felt something like awe and something like grief, tangled too tightly to separate. He had been afraid of one child. Afraid of the narrowing of choices. Afraid of being needed beyond his own capacity. He wondered, sitting there, whether capacity was something that grew only when demanded. His phone buzzed. A message from Lila, brief and careful. She said the party had ended. She asked where he was. He typed and erased. Typed again. He wrote that he needed time. that he would be home later. The word home felt provisional. He sent it anyway. The river smelled metallic. He breathed it in, steadying. He thought of Lila's face when Mara had spoken. The way her eyes had filled, not with jealousy, but with recognition. He had fallen in love with Lila because she seemed uncomplicated. Because she laughed easily. Because she did not ask him to revisit old rooms. Now he saw the cost of that comfort. He saw the ways he had mistaken quiet for shallow. He returned slowly. By the time he reached the apartment, evening had begun to press its blue into the sky. Inside, the decorations had already been taken down. Balloons deflated, ribbons gathered into a bag. Lila stood at the sink, rinsing cups. She did not turn when he entered. The sound of running water filled the space between them. "I didn't plan it," he said, because silence felt dangerous. "I didn't think." She turned then. Her face was tired, but open. "I know," she said. The words were gentle, and that gentleness cut deeper than anger might have. He leaned against the counter. The distance felt earned. "I wanted it to be simple," he said, hating himself a little for the repetition. Lila nodded. "I heard." They stood like that. The apartment hummed. Somewhere outside, a siren passed and faded. He thought of the children again. 3 lives beginning without his consent, without his presence. The realization did not sting as he expected. It settled. A fact, like gravity. "I'm scared," he said, surprising himself. He had practiced being brave. This felt different. "So am I," Lila replied. She dried her hands. "But not of her." He looked at her then. Really looked. The sash lay folded on the table, glitter dulled. He understood, in that moment, that shame was not something Mara had carried into the room. It was something he had brought with him, carefully wrapped and placed at the center. Later, alone in the bedroom, he lay awake. He listened to the building breathe. He thought of the invitation, cream paper, gold edge. He thought of precision mistaken for care. Outside, the river continued, indifferent and faithful. Inside, something loosened, quietly, without forgiveness, without absolution. Just the stillness of knowing that some arrivals change the shape of a life forever, whether or not you are ready. The night the babies arrived was quiet in the way storms sometimes are, all pressure and held breath. Mara counted contractions the way she had counted kicks, patiently, without superstition. The hospital room smelled like disinfectant and warm linen. Machines hummed. Nurses moved with practiced economy, speaking her name as if it were an anchor. She closed her eyes and let the sounds pass through her. There was no audience. No invitation. Just work. She did not think of him. That surprised her. She thought of her own hands, swollen and capable. She thought of the ceiling tiles and how each crack looked like a map she would never finish tracing. She thought of the way pain arrived not as an enemy but as a demand. When the first cry cut the air, thin and fierce, she laughed once, a sound torn from her chest. When the second followed, lower, indignant, she cried. By the third, a soft, astonished wail, she went very still. 3 distinct presences. 3 proofs. They laid them on her one by one, then together, a careful architecture of warmth and weight. The world narrowed to skin and breath. She whispered nothing. Names would come later. Meaning would arrive when it was ready. For now there was only this. The way her body, which had been a spectacle once, became a shelter. The way her heart learned a new rhythm without asking permission. In the days that followed, time lost its edges. Morning and night braided together. She learned the sound each child made when hungry, when tired, when simply overwhelmed by being. She learned how to hold 2 while the third waited, patient or furious, she could not yet tell. She learned how to accept help without gratitude performing. Nurses came and went. A social worker asked careful questions. Mara answered plainly. She had learned the value of plainness. Visitors were few. Her sister arrived once, eyes shining, arms full of groceries and silence. Her mother called every night and said she was proud in a voice that sounded older than before. Lila sent a message, brief and gentle, offering congratulations without expectation. Mara read it once, then again, and felt something like relief. She did not respond. Not yet. When they came home, the apartment felt smaller, as if it had been waiting to be claimed. 3 bassinets lined the wall. Diapers stacked like an argument against despair. At night, the city outside softened, traffic becoming a distant tide. Mara sat in the dim light and rocked, feeding, humming a tune she did not recognize. Exhaustion pressed in, but it did not frighten her. It felt earned. Weeks passed. The babies grew heavier. Their faces shifted daily, as if trying on themselves. Mara's body healed slowly, deliberately. Scars settled. She began to walk again, pushing a stroller that announced her presence before she arrived. Strangers smiled. Some stared. She let both happen. She had learned that attention was not a verdict. One afternoon, as autumn edged in, she took them to the park. Leaves fell without ceremony. She sat on a bench and watched the babies sleep, their breaths sinking and slipping apart. Across the grass, Lila stood with a paper bag in her hands, hesitating. Mara saw the question in her posture before the woman spoke. "Hi," Lila said. She did not come closer. "Hi," Mara replied. "I was in the neighborhood," Lila said, unnecessarily. She held up the bag. "I brought soup. If that's okay." Mara considered the space between them. The history that did not belong to either woman alone. "That's okay," she said. They Saturday. The babies slept on. Lila asked their names. Mara told her. Each name was a doorway. Lila listened. She nodded. She did not ask about the father. Mara did not offer. "I'm leaving," Lila said eventually. The words landed softly. "Not because of you." Mara looked at her. "I know." They sat a while longer. Leaves brushed the ground. When Lila stood to go, she paused. "You didn't steal anything," she said, as if correcting a record no one else would ever read. Mara watched her walk away. She felt no triumph. No vindication. Only a settling, like dust after a long day. That evening, alone again, Mara bathed the babies and laid them down. She turned off the light and stood listening to the quiet. 3 breaths. 1 room. The future did not announce itself. It waited. She sat in the dark and let the stillness hold.